My name is Danielle Schroeder. I am an associate engineer, and I've been in this role for almost 4 years. Civil engineering is generally anything that involves civilization, hence the name. So this is talking about drinking water, but it's also talking about infrastructure. So I'm more on the infrastructure side, but there's a lot of things that civil engineers are working on that you may not think of. So when you go to turn on the water when you brush your teeth in the morning, there's civil engineers that worked on that to make sure that you have water to use to drink, but also to turn on your faucet, to use the toilet, all of those things in the infrastructure of that side. There's also civil engineers working on pipe systems, so for gas or other things as well, or electric. And then we have that infrastructure that I talked about. So on the infrastructure side, that's usually what we think of with civil engineers. So roads, bridges, sports stadiums, all of those like built infrastructure. But there's also cool structures like roller coasters, or I talked about sports stadiums that might people think be cool, but I personally like to talk about civil engineers and roller coasters because not many people make that connection. And beyond that, infrastructure is important in all stages. So there may be some civil engineers working on the design side, but there's also construction and then maintenance. As a bridge engineer, there is, you design a bridge, but you don't just leave that bridge there. You need to make sure that you use maintenance and continue to maintain that bridge over the many years, because the lifespan of a bridge is not just 1 year, it's over 100 years, even more sometimes. Specify in terms of what I am. So I'm a bridge engineer, but as a bridge engineer, I kind of straddle both transportation and structures because I need to know the structural engineering side of things, but most of my projects are transportation. You don't usually have a bridge without a roadway or traffic control. So I'm working with transportation more often projects, if that makes sense. So, because there is so much in engineering that you can go into. There's people that are designing rockets, there's people designing vaccines, like there's everything in between. So I just, it's a cool field. So a typical day in the life of a bridge engineer really depends on the projects that I'm working on. Most of what I'm doing for the bridge design is usually in the office with my coworkers in a typical day. Right now I'm working remotely, but typically we're in the office working together on a variety of things that are put together to bring these projects to life. So for one of the projects I'm working on, I'm doing quantities. So I'm thinking about the bridge that we're putting in and thinking about all the little items that need to be part of this in terms of the soil that we need to bring there or the soil we need to take out of the existing place, the amount of rebar or reinforcement bar, which is the steel bars that we put in concrete, how many to the approximate pound, what we're using for that. So there's a lot of quantities that go into that. But there's also other calculations that I'm going into of there's a lot of pieces of a bridge that we break into smaller pieces and do some calculations about each of those pieces and how the load from talking about bridges, the load of people, the loads of cars, and all of that, how that trickles down into every little piece of a bridge. And then other than in the office, there are some times that when I'm working on a project that I'll go out into the field. So I'll do a site visit. There are some times where I've gotten to go on some of these existing bridges that we're working on to, add additional reinforcement or strengthening to these bridges. So I go out and assess that existing bridge in its existing conditions through a site visit, which is really fun. Yeah. Not just in the office all of the time. There is some outside work in my role and many of the roles in civil engineering, if you like that kind of part. So the traditional formal education to become a civil engineer is to go to a college and study civil engineering as your major. I personally did a 5-year program that included internships incorporated. So I did 5 years within multiple internships within it, which I really appreciated. I'm happy to talk more about internships if we'd like to. But essentially having that undergraduate degree in civil engineering is the formal way to get into becoming a civil engineer. However, there are non-traditional routes. I know of a few folks that started in working for a civil engineering firm in terms of being a CAD drafter or a computer-aided design drafter, and got the experience that way, and then worked with their Board of Education or licensing center to see how that education could be applied. But it definitely is highly dependent on the state and experiences in that part. So there are other ways, but typically it's going to school for 4 to 5 years studying civil engineering as your major. Because I'm not a professional engineer yet, that's something, so it depends on the year. I'm an engineer in training because in the state that I'm in, I need to get 4 years of progressive engineering experience and then take an exam and then become a PE. So I can't technically call myself a professional engineer. So I can, if you want me to walk through those two tests, I'm happy to do that if you want. So the way that this works is there are 2 exams as part of becoming a professional engineer. Before the professional engineer, you need to take the FE or Fundamentals of Engineering, which is something you would do either your senior year of college or post-graduation, since I believe there's a certain credit amount that you need to have under your belt. And once you take that exam and graduate, you become an EIT or an engineer in training. And then depending what state you live in, you then need to, in my case in Pennsylvania, I need to get 4 years of progressive engineering experience under a licensed PE or professional engineer, then apply for the PE, and then sit for the PE exam. So there is that extra part of it that you don't have to necessarily do, but most people in civil engineering do because we want to become a professional engineer. So you don't need it to be a civil engineer, but it's one of those that more often than not, folks become a PE. Typically, there's a financial part to it. You usually get a raise that's associated with getting your PE. But the more important part of getting a PE means that you can now stamp those plans. So when I, progress in my experience and then become the leader of a project, I will be that one that's stamping those plans with my PE seal, saying that I certify these plans, which is a really cool opportunity and acknowledgement. So that's why there's so many steps to become a PE, because it's so important in that side. So to kind of back up a little bit, under civil engineering, it can be a very broad field. So under the umbrella of civil engineering, there's a few disciplines: construction, geotechnical, water resources, transportation, environmental, and structural. For what I do currently, I kind of bridge the gap between the structural and the transportation through my work, but there are other connections. And I used my 3 internships during school to really figure out what I liked and what I didn't like. Because civil engineering is so broad, it gave me opportunity to see different fields, as well as size of companies, as well as there's the public side and private side. So my first internship was on the public side and more on the water resources side. And I used that to find out I didn't really want to go into water resources post-graduation. And that's okay, because ultimately I've used internships, and most people will, to find out what you like and what you don't like. And finding out what you like is almost as equally important, if not equally important, to finding out what you don't like. And so my journey into engineering has a twofold inspiration. First, my dad is a carpenter and actually built the house I grew up in, which is not something you hear very often, but really cool. So I've been around the construction process from a young age, and got to help my dad around the house when he'd add like additions or smaller things. So I've always been fascinated by construction. but never really heard the term engineering until my junior year of college or high school, junior year of high school. When one of my science teachers saw that there was going to be an engineering girls camp at a local college and said, hey, you like math and science, you should go see if engineering's for you. And I went there and I absolutely loved it. Um, the when I went the first time, because I got to go both my junior year and senior year of high school, you get to pick a bunch of different labs. So I tried a lot of different fields of engineering, so the biomedical or aerospace or mechanical. I got to do different labs, but the ones about civil engineering were the ones I loved. And it kind of was that perfect combination of the construction side, because there's a lot of construction in civil engineering with the math and science and problem solving skills and bringing them together. So that's essentially why I chose civil engineering. So with my job as a civil engineer, I work with a lot of people. As I was kind of talking about earlier, I work on a lot of different projects. And within those different projects, I'm working with fellow engineers, maybe fellow bridge engineers like my supervisor, but also to bring these projects to life, we need other engineers as part of this. We need geotechnical engineers looking at the soils where we're putting this bridge to make sure that we're okay. We need environmental engineers also in the area to make sure that we're following permits or if there's any environmental impacts that we're having. Again, bridges, usually when you think of bridges, you think of passenger cars going across them. So we're working with roadway engineers that are making sure that that roadway is built to what we need it to be. But we're also working with other people that are not technically in the technical side of things. Something that I like to talk about is stakeholders. So when we're bringing or putting a new bridge somewhere, we usually try to get the stakeholders or the people that live near that area to get them involved in the project and hear about things that they would like to see or existing bridges if we're replacing them. Some specific things that kind of come up is there historical aspects of the bridge that already exist? And that's not something we usually can hear or find out, just by looking at existing plans. We need to talk to the stakeholders or the people that live around there and ask them what's important to them. So we're working with engineers, non-engineers, many different people to bring these projects to life, which I think is one of my favorite parts of the job. I think of it as we better figure this out now rather than when we're going to construction and getting those. So it's a lot of the communication up front of it. But yes, I do always have people think of parks and recreation in terms of like public meetings part that comes up. I've never had anything as intense as some of the things on there, but that's what people usually think of when I say public meetings. My very first job was a cashier at a supermarket. And you learn a lot of skills that can be transferred to engineering or almost any career through becoming a cashier or anything that's in the kind of client relations kind of part of things, or customer service, I guess is a better way. Customer service roles can teach you so much about communication, customer relations, and communicating what needs to be done versus the customer being in front of you and having the balance between the customer is always right and the policies that exist, as well as conflict management. I know when I was interviewing for internships, I would always be talking about name a time when you solved a problem or you had some conflict that you needed to resolve. And one of the best examples that I could give is when I was a cashier and having someone that wanted to use a coupon that either was expired or something for it, and having to communicate to the customer why we couldn't take that coupon. So it's that conflict resolution or things like that that I've learned through my very first job. And yes, you may not think that being a cashier completely relates to engineering, but there's always going to be problems and small conflicts that come up, or larger conflicts, but conflicts that come up in engineering. So having that conflict management for years in the past can help me in my current job. Definitely think one of the best characteristics that's essential for civil engineers is that communication. We are communicating, as I talked about, we are communicating with our fellow engineers on projects. We are communicating with non-engineers. So communicating, it's one thing to do the calculations and put them together and say, okay, this is the specific type of bridge we're doing in the specific area and it's going to be these dimensions. But it's another thing to be able to take all that technical side and communicate it to other engineers that are working on the project, as well as non-engineers that are going to be in this area or this project is going to affect. And being able to take that information and communicate it effectively is so important to civil engineering. Particularly any equipment in terms of what you would think of physically. Maybe a calculator would be the first thing that comes to mind. But as a civil engineer, we do use a lot of software programs that typically the ones we talk about are CAD or computer aided design, so that we're putting all of our drawings together in these programs. But going back to internships, this is a great way to start learning these softwares and such that you can definitely learn it on the job, but you can definitely learn them through internships along the way. But as I kind of talked about, there's some people skills and soft skills that are good in this, but there's the technical side is a lot of things that you can learn on the job. So learning CAD on the job is definitely okay. And I'm learning things every day. I've just started learning a new program that's more on the structural analysis side. So I'm learning today, even almost 4 years out of school. Does not require me to travel. If folks are interested in traveling, there's definitely civil engineering jobs specifically. What comes to mind is the construction side. There's definitely more ability to travel if you choose the construction route. But I do not have to travel, and that's kind of what I prefer and kind of why I chose what I did. I think one of the pros is it's a lot more people focused than some other industries because transportation is getting people where they need to go and getting there safely. So I think I enjoy the more people facing part of the transportation industry, which may be a con for other people if they're not very wanting to be on the people facing side. That's a beauty of civil engineering. There are ways to just be on the technical side and not really be people focused if that's what you want to do. But I chose it to be on the people side. And particularly in bridge engineering, why I chose that within the transportation industry is because I help maintain and create ways for people to get where they need to go. In terms of scale, the US has over 600,000 bridges. So 600,000 bridges, and 30% approximately are 50 years and older. So going back to that maintenance part of it, there's a lot of what I do in terms of maintaining existing structures to extend their life. And I think that's really cool to be able to make, maybe I don't know every end user that's going to use this bridge, but that my work is helping keep people safe to cross all of these bridges, which is really cool. The one thing that I always like to talk about engineering specifically, it is one of the very few careers or very few degrees that you can just get an undergraduate degree and go into the field and make pretty good money. I believe of the top hundreds jobs of high paying jobs in that entry level, civil engineering is in the top 20, and most of the top 20 are in the engineering field. So the engineering high salary part of it combined with only needing an undergraduate degree as opposed to I'm thinking like doctors or lawyers where there's medical school or additional parts of it before you can start making money. I think civil engineering is one of the healthiest financial choices that you can make in a career path if you like that. And I get paid on an annual I get an annual salary, and then of course I get paid biweekly, but it's not on a for commission. It's a set salary in terms of what I do. I think the most common engineering stigma I hear is that engineers just work on their little cubicle by themselves all day, just typing on their computer, doing all those calculations, and that's what I hear. And that's not typically the case. If you want to stay the technical route and that's what you enjoy, you can do that. But more often than not, we are a people serving profession, so we're a people facing profession. We're talking to fellow engineers and non-engineers about these projects. We're working as a team. It's not just me building a bridge. I'm working with many engineers and technical staff to bring these projects to life. So I need to be able to communicate with all of them. There are the stigmas that most engineers are introverts. So I am an introvert, so I am part of that stigma, but there are many extroverted engineers in the field as well. I think my favorite part about being an engineer is bringing these things to life, being able to say that, oh, I've worked on that bridge. Kind of going back to when I talked about my civil engineering origin story. When my dad, as a carpenter, would, when we'd be driving around, he'd be like, oh, I worked on that building, all of those things. And I get to do that now as a bridge engineer and say, oh, I've worked on that bridge. Oh, we, added a retrofit to that bridge, which is a really cool thing of being able to see what I work on and all the effort that I put into something become a physical thing out in the universe that is helping people get where they need to go. I like to say that one of the negative parts of it is that every day is different, because we're working, especially, a few years out. I'm working on a lot of different projects at the same time. So every day is different. So it can get somewhat hectic trying to recall what bridge you're talking about. So like trying to switch between projects can definitely be hectic. So I definitely recommend, if you can keep yourself organized or learning how you can stay organized, that'll definitely help. But every day is different. So if that's not something, if you want something that's more steady in terms of consistency of what you're going to do, I don't know if civil engineering would particularly be a good field in your way, because it's definitely a everyday different kind of fun part to it that can also be a negative for folks. In terms of what I do, most times I'm working a 40-hour work week. So 8 hours a day. Typically, I do an 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with an hour for lunch. There are some times when we're getting really close to projects that or project ends, that I work a little bit more than that, but not much. And when I do work more than that, I do get overtime. So I do get paid for that extra amount of time, which is, I think, a plus and an important part of this. But work-life balance, you can still have a life, as that might be another stigma in terms of engineers don't have lives, but you can have a life outside of engineering. It gives you a pretty good financial perspective and financial background, to have money to be able to do things, as well as I volunteer for a lot of different things. I do have time where I just go walking with my dog, or things that I like to enjoy, or going to nice restaurants and such, and traveling. I get time to do all of those things. So I think engineers have a good work-life, or you can have a good work-life balance. Not all do, but I definitely think it is possible with engineering. Become a civil engineer, there is a lot of math and science. So this is a good, uh, I would recommend that this is the right career path for you if you like math and science. You just need to like it. So keep that in mind. Another thing that I think is um, very important to a engineer in general is that problem solving skills. So if you like to problem solve, or like I like to talk about when I was little, I liked the books Cam Jansen and Encyclopedia Brown. of the like who done it or like the riddles and you had to figure them out. So like I love the problem solving or like logic puzzles or things like that. So that's also what kind of drew me into engineering in general. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask. My favorite quote is by Wayne Gretzky, and it's you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So if you don't reach out or you don't uh, apply for something, the answer is no, because you didn't put yourself out there, you didn't try. So I definitely recommend that folks reach out. And the part of that as well as don't be afraid to reach out to a professional if you see them doing something fantastic. Like what you are doing here is exactly part of that, showing these students what career paths are out there, and letting them see a little bit of how that could be and if that's something that they find interesting. Because I can't tell you what you find interesting. So reaching out and asking those questions, I think, is the best thing that you can do to pursue and find out what career is for you.